Markets closed the day higher with the Nifty and Sensex hitting record levels. Nifty crossed 25,400 mark. Sensex soared past 83,000 during the session. The Sensex jumped over 1,400 points and Nifty settled above 25,350. All Nifty 50 stocks except Nestle ended the day in green with Hindalco, Bharti Airtel and NTPC leading the rally. Bajaj Housing Finance IPO becomes India's most subscribed ever with the total bid amount for the public issue at whopping 3.24 lakh crore rupees, topping 1% of India's GDP. According to the NSO data, India's nominal GDP at constant prices is estimated at 295.35 lakh crore in 23-24. Shares of pharma company Granules India dropped by as much as 17% today. The decline followed the company's announcement that the US FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has issued 6 observations for its Gagilpur facility in Telangana. Maruti Suzuki India launches Swift CNG at a starting price of 8.1 lakh rupees. In the new avatar, Swift CNG has better torque, fuel efficiency and an additional variant. With the introduction of Swift CNG, the country's largest car maker has now 14 CNG models in its portfolio. In what could bring relief to consumers, petrol and diesel prices may soon see a reduction if the global oil prices continue to stay low. Oil Secretary Pankaj Jain indicates that state-run fuel companies are likely to consider slashing fuel prices provided crude oil rates remain depressed for an extended period of time. The Labour Minister of Tamil Nadu has held talks with officials of Samsung Electronics today in a bid to resolve a strike that has disrupted its consumer electronics plant for 4 days now. Hundreds of workers at the plant in Chennai have boycotted work to seek higher wages in one of the biggest incidents of industrial unrests in recent years in India. And Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal launches the Trade Connect platform, e-platform, designed as a single touch point for existing and aspiring exporters to access essential information for increasing exports out of India. The government has started working on the second phase of the semiconductor policy, Semicon 2.0, which is expected to be in place in next 3 to 4 months. Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav said at Semicon India 2024 event. The minister also said that 3 to 4 states have attracted semiconductor investments and 1 unit will soon come up in Uttar Pradesh. The Union Cabinet approves a new scheme called Prime Minister Electric Drive Revolution in Innovative Vehicle Enhancement, which is PME Drive for promotion of electric vehicles in India, replacing the earlier flagship scheme FAME. The Ministry of Heavy Industries will implement the new scheme with a total outlay of 10,900 crore rupees over a period of 2 years. Hello and welcome. You're watching In Your Interest. I am Shweta Kothari. India's retail inflation has surged to 3.6% on an annual basis in August of 2024 as against 5-year low of 3.54% according to data released just a couple of minutes back. The food inflation, which accounts for around half of the overall CPI basket, accelerated to 5.66% in August from a 13-month low of 5.42% in the previous month, the data has now revealed. The headline inflation number, albeit within the Reserve Bank of India's tolerance range of 2 to 6%, has come in slightly higher in the month of August. What does it really mean for the economy and whether this will dim the chances of a possible rate cut in future? Let's talk about that. Joining us on the show is Mithali Nikore, founder and chief economist at Nikore Associates. Mithali, good to have you back on the show. Thank you very much for taking time out. Your first quick reaction on the inflation at 3.65%, slightly above than all the other estimates out there.
Thanks, Shweta, for having me as always, for sharing my analysis on this. So, I think one of the charts that you were just showing, before we cut into the screen, was around the data over the last year on month inflation. And if you notice, the numbers for August 2023 actually stood at 6.83, whereas the number for August 2024 is sitting at 3.65. Now, if you look, there's a clear declining trend in the annual inflation rates on a month on month basis over the last year. I would say that this is very good news for the Indian economy because it means that all the efforts that the RBI has been taking in terms of keeping interest rates constant for the last 5 or 6 meetings and discussions and deliberations that the RBI Monetary Policy Committee has been having are now bearing fruit, and we're seeing that inflation is stabilizing. The other factor which is kind of driving this more stable inflation rate is the lower fuel prices that you were also talking about earlier. That, if you see global fuel prices stabilizing a little bit, we see that cut is now going to start passing on to consumers in the prices of goods that are being transported from place to place. So logistics cost comes down. Also, investment in the logistics sector, I think, starting to bear fruit now, where we see that the overall inflation rates are falling. So I
All right.
would not actually read this.
Okay, I want to stick to right now inflation numbers. I will go to petrol and diesel prices in just a bit, but sticking on to food inflation, the number here coming in at 5.66% for the month of August is slightly higher, in fact a lot higher if you look at it in percentage terms, from 5.42% in the previous month to 5.66% in the month of August. What are you making of food inflation? Still continues to be a pain point, not just for the headline inflation number, but also for people at large.
Shweta, actually, I would say that in this quarter, we are doing much better on food inflation than the previous quarter, because you can see that in the previous quarter, we hit a high of almost 9% in June, whereas in the last 1 or 2 months, we've managed to get that under control as well and bring it down to below 6%, which I think is an important target, having below 6% food inflation rate, given the uncertainties that are associated with the different climatic events. Even in this quarter, we have seen some droughts, some floods coming in. And despite that, the food inflation being managed because of the rice and wheat distribution schemes that actually make it easier for a large proportion of the population to at least access basic food grains. So I think there is a good management of the food inflation, but we definitely need to invest in, better mechanisms of food distribution.
Another number that has come out just a couple of minutes back is the India industrial output growth for the month of July at about 4.8%. Is that well within the expectation?
I think, Shweta, that's a little bit lower than what I was personally expecting. I was expecting that to be, a little bit higher in the range of 5.5%, because we've been seeing very good numbers when it comes to manufacturing growth. If you remember, even for the GDP data that came out recently, we saw manufacturing growth coming in at 7%, before that at 10%. So I was actually expecting the IIP to be a little bit higher in this in this cycle, but I think it's a little bit lower than my expectation. I was expecting in the range of 5%.
Okay, what played the spoil sport? From what I'm reading, it slowed to 4.8% in July, mainly due to poor show by mining, manufacturing sectors. Could that be because in the month of July we were just coming out of the election euphoria, so perhaps it will start picking up now in the month of August?
Actually, in fact, Shweta, you're very right. This links with the entire macroeconomic scenario in the country in the April to June quarter, because a lot of decision making, is paused during election cycles. A lot of decision making around policies, around approvals, that gets a little bit, stalled. And I do think that we'll see new investment decisions. Also, industrialists will try to defer their investment decision to seeing, okay, where is the political, environment coming to be more stable, with states, which locations, etc. All these choices and decisions are sometimes deferred till post elections. So that is definitely one reason. But I do feel that there is an overall macroeconomic slowdown that we did witness with the GDP numbers. And I think somewhere we have to look at our own investment strategies, especially in the manufacturing sector, making them more export oriented, making them more climate resilient. These are two important measures we need to start taking in order to boost growth.
Okay, and another, important obviously was the number that came out of US inflation data. That number was important at 2.5% at a 43-month low year on year in the month of August. Are we looking at, and this was lower than expectation, so are we looking at therefore, some sort of realignment on what could come by the way of a Fed rate cut come 18th of September?
Absolutely, Shweta. I think the whole global markets are waiting for the Fed rate cut. And I do think that the RBI will also follow it up with a rate cut, given the lower than expected GDP numbers. And also a good solid record on inflation management. The conditions are now ripe for the RBI to come and announce a rate cut, even in the Indian interest rates, on the back of reductions in the US interest rates. I do expect the US interest rate cuts to be not so deep. I think they are
What is your expectation?
To do it in two phases.
What is your expectation, given there's been a conflict of data here emerging? While the jobs data has been extremely disappointing, inflation still continues to inch up. We were looking at, and a lot of economists and obviously the Fed was looking at a possibility of a soft landing. Do you think they have been able to mitigate, the inflationary pressures so far? So it's about time now for a major rate cut. What is your expectation around US rate cut? Will it now be tempered, given that inflation data is not very favorable?
No, I think a 2.5% inflation rate is still very manageable, but I still think they're going to go with their original plan of a soft landing. So maybe a 0.25 to 0.5 basis points in this round, and then another 0.5 or maybe even 1% in December. But at least for now, it will be tempered, 0.25 to 0.5 basis points. I don't think it'll be more than that.
All right, not more, maybe more than half a percentage point. But what about India? Are we looking at a possibility of a rate cut anytime soon? Will the RBI follow US Fed? Should it wait for US Fed to cut rates? Because if you're looking at India inflation numbers, it is coming well within the range, well below 4%, at least in the last few months. Would you say that 4% is the new normal, below the 4% range is the new normal, or should we wait for a couple of more months for it to be constant at 4% before RBI starts cutting rate?
I think at this point in time, we can't call below 4% new normal. But at the same time, we have to now consider, is this the right time for the rate cut? And I think conditions are ripe for a rate cut, because at the end of the day, this is the time when we're seeing the GDP numbers, slow down. We can't afford for a GDP slowdown in any case, because at the end of the day, when we look at our overall growth goals, poverty reduction goals around income redistribution, around improving the standard of living for our population, all of that requires macroeconomic growth. And therefore, the conditions with inflation being stable are good for the RBI to announce a rate cut, maybe following, the signals given by the US Fed. But definitely they have to wait and watch for the US Fed signals.
All right. Well, that's the word coming in as far as inflation data is concerned, and whether RBI will cut interest rates post US Feds. We'll, of course, have to wait for just a couple of more days to figure that out. Mithali, continue to stay with us. We'll be back after a very short break.
Not quite lived up to their pre-tournament billing, delivering a series of less than convincing performances. With 2 draws and a solitary win.
Your son will be Messi. No studies, just football all day. Go, my son, go. Make my face shine through playing football.
Not only your face, but also the country's. I will conquer the world by playing football. Come, let's go to Germany!
World's largest football talent hunt, News 9 Indian Tigers and Tigresses. In association with DFB Pokal, Bundesliga, BVB and India Football Center. Train and play matches in Europe. Register now and fly to Germany. IndianTigersandTigresses.com.
Hey, careful, huh? My daddy got it from abroad. Disaster! How will you pay for the loss now?
In stock market, you should take risk as per your capacity and knowledge. Trade in options very carefully.
Wow, Dikra! Absolutely perfect. Take risk with full understanding.
सोच कर, समझ कर, invest कर.
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
As a Telangana person, I will not accept.
How do ordinary folks deal with this?
Cooking is an act of love. The first act of love we receive from our mothers in the families.
Modern Indian food is all about contemporary and innovative approach to traditional Indian cooking.
Representation it's also important, no?
I want to wear this white coat every day and then be a chef.
There are stories. If the name of whiskey is Indri, then there is a whole story behind that.
Cooking food is like a therapy, and eating one is like a pleasure I can give it to myself. With Lounge Nights, I'm on a journey to celebrate and recognize the best food and nightlife establishments in various cities across India.
Radico presents Lounge Nights every Saturday and Sunday only on News 9 Live.
Welcome back. You're watching In Your Interest. I'm Shweta Kothari. In what could bring relief to consumers, petrol and diesel prices may soon see a reduction if global oil prices continue to stay low. Oil Secretary Pankaj Jain indicated that state-run fuel companies are likely to consider slashing fuel prices provided crude oil rates remain depressed for an extended period of time. Now, this comes as India seeks to ramp up crude purchases from cost-effective suppliers like Russia, while also pushing for increased output from OPEC countries. Currently, oil prices have dipped to near 3 years lows, enhancing the profitability of fuel marketing companies. On Tuesday, Brent crude oil fell below $70 per barrel for the first time since December of 2021, sparking hope for a reduction in pump prices. The drop is attributed to concerns over a slowdown in global economic growth, which is weighing in on energy demand. Now, state-run fuel retailers who control about 90% of India's fuel market are now enjoying favorable marketing margins due to the lower global prices. If the trend persists, a price cut at pumps could be on the horizon for Indian consumers. Meanwhile, on the domestic front, crude oil prices edged up on Thursday. Crude oil futures for October delivery rose by 51 to 5,709 per barrel on the multi-commodity exchange as traders widened their position on the back of strong spot demand. Globally, oil prices also ticked up, with West Texas Intermediate crude climbing to $68.16 per barrel, which is about 1.26%, and Brent crude gaining 1.32% in New York. Now, Mithali Nikore continues to be with us on the show. Mithali, from what we are picking up and what Oil Secretary is saying, there is a possibility of a petrol or diesel rate cut. Do you think oil marketing companies are likely to pass on that benefit of extended lower global crude oil prices to consumers anytime soon?
Absolutely, Shweta. I think this is very much on the cards because, again, this links with the broader macroeconomic context in which we are currently situated and operating. What we have observed is that in the April to June quarter, we saw a slowdown in the GDP growth. Now, of course, a lot of it is attributable to the elections, but at the same time, the government realizes that there is a need to create jobs very rapidly, and there is a need to boost the growth rates in the overall macroeconomy. Now, oil prices play a massive role in that because they impact the price and the overall inflation rates, and they impact the price of nearly every commodity. So when you pass on a rate cut in terms of oil prices to the economy, it's almost the same impact as, a rate cut on the interest rate side, on the monetary side. So this can be a massive boost, a fiscal measure in a sense for the economy, and almost like a bonanza for the economy. So I do think that this is on the cards. This has already been announced by the Petroleum Secretary, and I think that each of the state-run companies will have to pass on the benefit to the consumers, and it will really have a, growth effect booster pill shot for the economy in that sense.
Okay, and obviously also likely lower inflationary pressure, despite and apart from making it easier for people to be able to afford petrol and diesel, which climbed to an all-time high in the last couple of months at about 90 to 100 rupees per litre in India at the moment. But what sort of hold does Petroleum Ministry really have? Now, the last slash in price we saw was in March. This was around election time, which is when usually we have seen in the past that petrol and diesel prices are slashed down. What measures and tools can the government really use right now to bring down the prices? Because from what we understand, they can only nudge the state-run refiners to cut down prices, but it's really in their hand. It's in the hands of OMCs.
Of course, it's in the hand of OMCs, but the OMCs are also, at some level, there is an understanding that the OMCs are operating these companies as a public good, as a public service, and they are financed at the end of the day by government, advisors, by government functionaries, not so much by bureaucrats, but by functionaries by way of, and by the appointment of the government of India. So there is a sway that the Petroleum Ministry does have on the OMCs. And at the same time, the OMCs also realize that this will make good business sense, because when you pass on a lower price to the consumers, the amount of sales, the quantum of sales is likely to shoot up, and it will create a virtuous cycle across the economy that will boost macroeconomic demand and boost sales even further.
Okay.
So I think this is
but
more
Mithali,
of a business decision.
Right, absolutely. But since we are short on time, I also want to understand from you, what sort of time horizon are you looking at? Because from what I'm reading and from what's coming out is that perhaps OMCs in India are going to be on a wait and watch mode, because remember, crude oil prices globally were about $90 a barrel in the month of April. They've come down now to $70 a barrel. There is an extended volatility. So our OMC is going to wait, because India, imports nearly 87% of its crude oil needs. Should they be waiting for a while before they start passing on, or do they have enough corpus built up by the way of the margins that they have accrued? It's about time to start passing on immediately.
No, I don't think it will be immediate. There will be some wait and watch, but I don't think the wait and watch period will be too long. I do believe that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, actually, we could hear an announcement on this front. At least maximum 2 to 3 weeks. I don't think they'll wait more than that.
Okay, and before I let you go, I think we all know how geopolitical risks play out on petrol and diesel prices, and they are likely to, maybe disrupt supply chains going forward. Would that mean that global crude oil prices may start inching up in a couple of, days from now?
No, I don't expect global crude oil prices to inch up so fast. At this point in time, the geopolitical tensions that we're seeing are almost like a permanent fixture of, the global trade and the global economy, and global supply chains are being re-engineered to a great extent. They have been re-engineered, to adapt to the new geopolitical alignments and the situation. So therefore, I do not think, that this situation is going to change much at this point in time. The global prices, I do believe we're entering a new era of greater stability in the next 6 to 10 months.
Thank you very much for taking time out for joining us on that story. So as per what's coming out of Ministry of Petroleum, there's likely to be a cut in petrol prices in next coming few days. That is, if the global crude oil prices continue to remain lower. But that's all we have in this show. Thank you very much for watching. Welcome back. Breaking news coming in on the show. In a tense standoff amid RJ Kaur Medical College case, Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee of West Bengal is waiting now in an empty auditorium as protesting doctors have refused to meet her. That's the latest coming in as far as the outreach by Mamata Banerjee is concerned. Despite efforts from Chief Secretary Manoj Pant to mediate the ongoing dispute, the doctors are demanding live streaming of their meeting with the Chief Minister. Until then, they are protesting and have not met the Chief Minister there on your screens, waiting in an empty hall. They've also questioned the lack of transparency in the meeting as the situation is escalating. The Chief Minister remains seated. She is awaiting a resolution, but the agitating junior doctors had reached the West Bengal State Secretariat Nabanna for the talks at about 5:25 p.m. today, but they are insisting on their demand for live telecast of the meeting, in absence of which they have refused to meet the Chief Minister of West Bengal. And the Chief Minister, of course, on your screens, waiting there in an empty hall. My colleague Kabir joining us from the newsroom. Kabir, the visuals, of course, coming in there, not looking very good for Mamata Banerjee right now.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Shweta. Mind you, this is the second day of the same meeting. The cease work protest continues. Yesterday, this meeting was called on by the Chief Secretary, Manoj Pant. He said only 15 members are going to be allowed. And the doctor said, nah, that's not going to happen. We need 30-member delegation that's going to go to the Nabanna, the Secretariat, to meet the Chief Minister. The Chief Minister needs to be present for this meeting. And look at the situation that has prevailed at this point in time right now. Shweta, we're showing you those visuals on the screens. The Chief Minister sitting there alone with some more administrative heads. This meeting was supposed to take place at 5 p.m. The delegation of the junior resident doctors, the protesting, agitating doctors, was already late. Moreover, 32 people ended up coming there. Firstly, the Secretariat said only 15 people are going to be allowed. Later on, the doctor said, we're going to send a delegation of 30 people. The Secretariat paid heed. They said, okay, send us the list of those 30 names. Now, 32 people ended up coming there for this particular meeting. But like you pointed out, the actual bone of contention at this point in time still seems to be the live telecast of this meeting. The Secretariat has already pointed it out that it's not going to be telecast live. You can videograph this particular meeting. It can be used for reference later on, but it's not going to be telecast live. But the doctors, they're not budging. They're remaining very adamant, and which is why the hall at this point in time remains empty. The Chief Minister, mind you, is sitting there. How will this optics play out? Because the agitating doctors are already saying that we've dwelt away from the brutal rape that was actually taking place there. Now we're already talking about the CBI trying to find out financial irregularities and the political slugfest around the RJ Kaur Medical College rape and horror, not talking about the case at hand, the brutal rape that actually took place there. How is this going to play out? Well, we'll have to wait and find out. At this point in time, resident doctors, 32 of them, if I'm being precise, outside the Nabanna, inside the Secretariat, in that hall, it's empty. The Chief Minister sitting there all alone.
All right, Kabir, thank you very much for joining in with all those details. There you have it on your screens. Chief Minister of West Bengal sitting there trying to meet the junior officers who are waiting outside in protest. But that's all we have in the show. Thank you very much for watching.
Give it to me, pass. We'll put new glasses in the windows and they keep breaking it. This is the fourth time. You are playing football throughout the day. Will you win the world by playing football?
Yes, uncle. I will now conquer the world by playing football. Let's go to Germany.
World's largest football talent hunt, News 9 Indian Tigers and Tigresses. In association with DFB Pokal, Bundesliga, BVB and India Football Center. Train and play matches in Europe. Register now and fly to Germany. IndianTigersandTigresses.com.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
Who am I?
Nobody can crack that mystery.
There is a certain expectation of me.
That's the only contradiction.